Well, this is Eric, and I'm back for part 2 of the Freewill and Determinism screencast overview. We just finished up talking about the view of determinism, and in this section of the screencast, we will talk about libertarianism, incompatibilism, and wrap up the overview. So, this is the idea of libertarianism. We're going to start off with the same basic claim. All matter and energy is subject to the law of cause and effect. Our bodies, including our brains, are made up of matter and energy. But our minds are not subject to the laws of cause and effect, at least not totally. Therefore, at least some of the things we do are not necessarily the effect of prior causes. In other words, our past does not determine our future, at least not in a comprehensive deterministic way. Now, I will add a caveat here. We'll talk about in class on Wednesday or later in the week. There are some materialists who are libertarians, and that's going to sound odd, especially since if you think about there's a real strong connection between a dualist metaphysician, right? Someone who believes that there are two kinds of stuff in the universe, physical and mental. It's pretty easy to see how someone like Descartes could believe in free will, because he's going to say, of course, we have a brain and we have a body, and everything in the physical world is subject to these deterministic laws of physics. But then we've got this mental realm of thoughts and beliefs and ideas and intentions, and the things in the mental realm are not subject to the laws of cause and effect. And so that's where free will comes in. Of course, dualists do have the problem of talking about how this this mind that's not subject to the laws of cause and effect and hence can have free will, how can it impact the body and make us do things, since the body can only react to cause and effect? We can certainly talk more about that. But most libertarians are probably dualists. But again, there are some materialists that believe in free will. They're going to say just somehow, in some strange way, physical things like brains can give rise to something called freedom. But for now, let's just focus on libertarianism. And I think we can see a direct connection between someone who believes in a mind as a non-physical substance and someone who believes we have free will. Because, of course, if we look at our friend Rex here, atoms and particles behave in probabilistic ways, but the libertarian is probably going to think our mind is not made of atoms and particles. Descartes is going to say we have a mind, but it's not made of atoms or particles or energy. It's made out of thought stuff, whatever that is. We're going to transition now and think specifically about how these issues of free will and determinism relate to moral responsibility, or just responsibility in general. And the reason to pay attention here is we're going to be arguing a court case. We're going to be arguing about whether someone is morally and legally responsible for his actions, or are we going to say that someone is not morally or legally responsible? So here we've got a picture of an asteroid heading toward Earth. It looks like a big asteroid. And my question to you is this an evil asteroid? Does it make sense to say that the asteroid is responsible for hitting the Earth? Does it make sense to say that the asteroid is responsible for killing billions of people? Palmer on page 231 suggests that responsibility, that the notion of responsibility that most of us have, presupposes or assumes the freedom to do the thing, and also that the outcome could have been otherwise. Right? In order to say someone's responsible for something, it means they could have done it and did do it, and that they could have done something different. We say they're responsible because they had a choice to do it or not to do it, and they chose to do it. Could the asteroid have done otherwise? Most of us are probably going to say no. Asteroids aren't making choices. They're subject to the laws of physics, and for whatever reason, this asteroid's trajectory through the solar system is taking it into a collision course with Earth. And most likely, if astronomers would have seen this asteroid 100 years ago or 50 years ago, and if we could have measured precisely what its orbit was, we could have predicted that the asteroid would hit the Earth, because the Earth and the asteroid are both moving according to the laws of physics, not making choices. They're moving in completely predictable ways. How about this? Most of us would probably not say that this Predator drone is responsible for firing the missile, or that the drone is responsible for the damage or deaths that are a result of the missile exploding. Why? For the same reason we didn't think the asteroid was responsible. We don't think the Predator drone made a free choice to fire the missile. The drone could not have done otherwise. The drone is a complex set of metal and computer components and gears and pulleys and who knows what else is in there. But whatever it is, it's not thinking. It's not making choices. Who's making the choice? The person who's controlling the drone from wherever back in the United States with a joystick and a keyboard. Well, how about this guy? Is he responsible for pulling his gun to rob the diner? Did he make a free choice to commit this crime? And could he have done otherwise? When it comes to legality and morality, most of us are going to say that we're only responsible for the things that we chose to do and that we could have done otherwise. So, what do we make of a human being? Here's the libertarian response. This should say libertarianism and moral responsibility. I guess it does say that. If I'm a libertarian, a believer in free will, I'm probably going to say something like this. Yes, this guy is responsible for pulling his gun to rob this diner. There were causal influences on his behavior. There were things that led him up to this point, things that are influencing what he is about to do, but he could have done otherwise. At some moment, there was a moment of choice when he was sitting down and he was deciding, should I pull the gun and stand up? And he chose to stand up with the gun. He could have chose otherwise, therefore he's guilty, he's morally responsible. But what about the determinist? I imagine a determinist would have to say something like this. This guy was not responsible for pulling his gun. Why? Because there were prior causes that led inexorably to this event. Inexorable means without any other option. He could not have done otherwise. This guy is really no different than the asteroid or the drone. There were innumerable causes, genetic causes, psychological causes, all of these kinds of things that happened to this person in the past that led up to this event. Things like he feels terrible because he just caught his girlfriend cheating on him. He was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, so he has poor impulse control. He was bullied as a kid, abandoned by his mother. He has a very low IQ. He just lost his job and his savings because he was hit by a car. He has chronic depression, which led to pain, and chronic pain, which led to depression. I guess if he was depressed, that could have led to him being in pain as well. He had a white supremacist father, so he hates the owner of the diner. Of course, he couldn't control who his father was or how bad his father treated him or how his father indoctrinated him with all these ideas of hatred for people of other races. His dog is dying of cancer. He needs $1,200 today to save his dog. So what are we going to say? The determinist is going to say all of these things that happened to him led to the state of mind right before he pulled the gun, and those deterministic factors led him to pull the gun and rob the store, or rob the diner. The last thing we need to look at is this view called compatibilism. And most of you are going to initially think it is the weirdest view, but we'll see why it might not necessarily be the oddest of the three views. As we know, libertarians and determinists agree that for an act to be considered free, it must be the case that the action was not causally determined. Right? It can have causal influences, but it cannot be causally determined. A free act is one where the agent had an authentic choice to do otherwise. So if all human actions are the necessary outcomes of prior events, then no human actions are free. There is no free will and no moral responsibility. Both the libertarians and the determinists are going to agree with this, that for an act to be free, it can't be determined. So the libertarians are going to say, because things aren't determined, we are free. The determinist is going to say, because we are determined, we aren't free. The compatibilist, though, I mean, look at the word. It's got the word compatible in it. compatibilist argues that this is simply the wrong way to think about free will. The compatibilist thinks that free will is compatible with the idea that all human actions are causally determined. So what's the compatibilist going to say? The compatibilist is going to say freedom only means doing what you want to do. The compatibilist would argue that there were prior causes that it led inexorably to this event. He could not have done otherwise. The compatibilist is going to agree that all of these things determined that he would in fact be at this moment in his life, that he would desire to pull the gun and rob the diner. And so, please don't forget, compatibilism is determinism. But the compatibilist is going to say he could have done otherwise if he wanted to, but he didn't want to do otherwise. He did exactly what he wanted to do. Now, what he wanted to do in that moment was in fact caused by prior events, but that doesn't change the fact that he did exactly what he wanted to do. His choice to rob the diner was caused by his desires, the state of his personality, the quality of his character traits, his intellect and reasoning capacity. But these are his desires, his personality traits, and so forth. The compatibilist is going to say free just means voluntary. Free means not compelled or not impeded. Freedom simply means free from external control. Now I've got a picture here of Robo-Rat, and many of you may find this disturbing, but scientists actually can control a rat just like we can control a remote control car. We put a computer with electrodes going into the rat's brain, and those electrodes are going into certain motor control centers in the rat's brain. And so there is someone with a remote control hitting buttons, driving the mouse. Literally pushing a button and sending an impulse into this little computer, which activates a part of the rat's brain, which causes the rat to turn right or turn left. I mean, theoretically, we could do this to a human being, and certainly we've seen movies and kinds of things where someone actually controls your brain. The Robo-Rat is not free, even from the compatibilist point of view, because his actions are not voluntary. They're compelled. They are externally controlled. So to the extent that human actions are not voluntary, to the extent that they're compelled or caused by external control, then the compatibilist is going to say human beings are not free. But to the extent that our actions are controlled and caused by our own desires and personality, if they are voluntary, then they're free. I'm going to wrap up part 2 of the screencast. I apologize for taking longer than I wanted to, but we will pick up on all of these issues on Wednesday and Friday. So thank you very much for listening.